everyone, welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya and today we talk about US lawyers and journalists suing the CIA, the war in Syria, and FIFA suspends recognition of Indian Football Federation. Members of activist journalist Julian Assange's legal team and two American journalists have sued Mike Pompeo, former director of the CIA, and the agency for allegedly snooping on them. They say the CIA violated the US Constitution when it recorded their conversations with Assange and copied their computer and mobile phone contents. At the time, Assange was sheltered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He's currently battling his extradition to the United States. We spoke to Anish from People's Dispatch, who has been following the story for years. Hi Anish, good to have you here. Anish, what is the case filed against the CIA? What are the implications of this case?
So this case is directly related to the UC Global case, as we have all talked about in the show and on our platform, which is happening in Spain right now, where a special investigation by the High Court of Spain have actually found that there was extensive surveillance, illegal surveillance, and snooping and spying of Assange while he was held up at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Now, this thing is, they did it at the behest of the CIA. That is what the allegations stand. There are plenty of evidence to show that the director of UC Global at the time, David Morales, actually did work and had several meetings with the CIA and has in fact even admitted to the fact that he actually did it in the behest of the CIA, which was at that point led by Mike Pompeo under the Trump administration. So this is a direct conflict of interest in the case, definitely. Firstly, because all conversations, as we know, what we know is that the snooping happened in the span of a couple of months in 2017, and this included pretty much everything that Assange did inside the embassy, including all his meetings with his friends, family members, journalists, even his lawyers. So this is something that actually puts not only Assange's personal liberty and freedoms at risk, but also the people who were there conversing with him. Their privacy, their what is called the First Amendment Act in the United States is completely violated by the US. It is pretty much a civil liberties lawsuit, we have to remember, that is being leveled by these four individuals, two of whom were Assange's lawyers and two of whom were journalists who actually interviewed him. So this case is going to be very significant because as we have talked about the spying case, which, as we have all seen, gets very little attention in the mainstream media internationally. It is the first time that the spying itself is going to be scrutinized in the US courts. And that has never happened before. That was never even attempted before by anybody. So even the current Biden administration, despite widespread reports of this having happened illegally in a foreign land, violating sovereignty of two other countries. So this is something that is quite significant in the coming days in the Assange case, as we know.
Right. Anish, what could be the possible bearing on the extradition that the United States seems hell-bent upon, taking custody over Assange?
Yes, so it is going to be quite interesting how it unfolds, because obviously the extradition request still stands. It's a very political request. At this point, the decision made by the United Kingdom is also political, since it's the secretary, the Home Secretary, that actually signed it off, who is a political appointee herself, who was a political appointee, at least. And so at this level, we have to remember that this political hounding is definitely happening. Very little chance that it is going to be, there is going to be any retreat from the US side on this matter. But if and when, and we are talking about a big if, obviously, if and when Assange gets extradited, this is going to be significant factor in not only the extradition process that the United States has initiated in 2019, but also against the grand jury case that they have, the charges, the 17 odd charges under the Espionage Act that they have leveled against him, which is funny considering the fact that they are the ones now caught red-handed spying. So this definitely will impact. How it will impact is a different question, because it is not as if the court systems are not completely malleable. We have seen political interest being taken over, not only in the United States, but elsewhere. And in this case, we do not know how much of that is going to be, how much of that is going to have a positive impact on Assange in the coming days. But definitely, this will bring a lot of attention, hopefully, and a lot of scrutiny on how the United States has conducted itself when it comes to Assange, who they have been hounding for more than a decade. And not only in one nation, but like a couple of other nations as well have been involved and were collateral damages to this international hounding of a journalist, a publisher that they claim to have spied upon them for publishing their documents on war crimes.
Right, Anish. Thanks a lot for that update. The United States has claimed it has repelled drone attacks by Islamic State militants in Syria. The incident occurred at Al-Tanf, where US forces are based. The attack comes hours after an Israeli airstrike killed 3 Syrian soldiers in Tartus on Sunday. The US presence in Al-Tanf is apparently part of a so-called international coalition it leads to fight remnants of Islamic State. However, Syria claims the base is illegal and accuses the United States of looting millions of dollars of its oil reserves and training anti-Assad forces. Syria has claimed the US presence in Al-Tanf prolongs the war in the country. The war in Syria has already displaced millions and killed many thousands and created an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Let us talk to Abdul from People's Dispatch about this. Abdul, can you begin by telling us how justified are the claims of the United States over Al-Tanf?
Well, the base is illegal as per the international law. You cannot create a base in a country without the permission of the government. And when the base was created in 2016, the circumstances were different. Today, the circumstances are quite different. Then US had claimed that it is a part of the international coalition fighting against the Islamic State terrorist organization. But 2017 itself, US has declared that the ISIS is defeated. So since 2017 till now, there is no justification for the US to be there at that base. Then this base has been used time and again to launch different small-scale attacks against the Syrian government, both by the US forces and by the forces opposed to the Bashar al-Assad government in Syria. So Syrian government time and again claims that the base is basically nothing but a base for smuggling its resources out of the country, a base which provides backup and support and training and armaments to the anti-government forces in the country. Hence, and because after all, the government, if the government is not ready to host the US forces in the country, there is, of course, ultimately no justification for the US to be there. All other claims about attacks and counterattacks basically originates from this primary illegality, that you violated the sovereignty of a country and you basically established a base on their land without their permission.
Right, Abdul. Abdul, what is the game plan? What is the end game for the United States over here?
Well, it is not very difficult to understand why the US wants to be there. Apart from it being nearer, apart from it being basically questioning Bashar al-Assad government, which has been considered to be an ally of Iranians and an ally of Russians, and part of the larger geostrategic geopolitical game. This base provides US a kind of some kind of upper hand, that it has a direct military presence in the region, in the country which is considered to be a hostile country. That is one, of course, is the reason. That again, it also provides a crucial backup to the Israeli government, which has used the base. And there was just a report in the Wall Street Journal a few days back that all the Israeli attacks inside Syria since the war began in 2012, hundreds of them, have been coordinated with the US. And of course, the presence on the ground provides that coordination, the review makes it much more effective. So that is another thing. Of course, apart from these geostrategic and geopolitical objectives, helping Israel, countering Iran, countering Russian presence, countering Bashar al-Assad government itself, it also basically becomes a base through which they can basically influence the regional politics and regional distribution of resources. As I said before, the Syrian government has claimed about a stealing of its natural resources, particularly oil. Syria, of course, was not a big producer of oil before the war began, but it was one of the exporters. Whatever it's produced, it exported the oil, and it was the main source of state revenue. Since the war, the production has gone down, but whatever production is there, more than 3/4 of that production is basically looted, as per the estimate provided by the Syrian government, by the US forces and the forces allied with it. And then that oil is smuggled out of 18,000 barrels per day production. 16,000 plus 60,000 plus barrel of oil is basically smuggled out of Syria. Imagine a state which is heavily impoverished because of the war, a decade-old war, losing its main source of revenue. That basically is not only unethical, but it is also basically a clear-cut attempt to basically weaken and provide, not only weaken the government, but also impoverish, keep the people, Syrian people, millions of Syrian people impoverished. So we should see all these things together in order to understand why US does not want to leave Al-Tanf base.
Right, Abdul. Thanks a lot for joining us. FIFA has suspended the All India Football Federation, citing undue influence from third parties. It means FIFA does not think the AIFF has full control over the AIFF. It means the October Under-17 women's matches are off India's sporting menu. The 85-year-old AIFF was never suspended before. Recently, the Supreme Court of India disbanded the AIFF and set up a high-profile committee to govern the sport in India. The committee created an advisory council comprising 12 members, but it was immediately disbanded. The involvement of a former president of the AIFF, a politician in the current committee, seems to have tipped the balance at FIFA against the AIFF. Siddhant Ani from NewsClick has been tracking these developments. We caught up with him just a short while ago. Right, Siddhant, welcome to the show. Siddhant, what does this ban mean for football fans and players in India?
Pragya, we've seen, it happened late night India time at least, or very early in the morning. So very similar to that Nehruvian speech, as the world sleeps. Unfortunately, India, in this case, not really awaking to life and freedom, but instead a ban from FIFA. It's been in the making, and fans are justifiably annoyed, up in arms about the ban coming into place now. Because in October, starting on the 11th of October, India is meant to be hosting the FIFA World Cup for women under the age of 17 years. So immediately what it means for players involved is that this was meant to be the first Indian women's team of any kind to participate in a FIFA finals tournament. It's the first time, of course, India is hosting a tournament of this kind. So if the ban remains in place for the next 2 or 3 months, then the hosting rights for that tournament will go away, which probably then also means that India's team, which would participate in this tournament, would not be able to, because first of all, they haven't qualified. They were only there by virtue of being a host nation. And secondly, if there's a wider suspension on the federation, then it is not allowed to send representative teams to international competitions. So, for example, there's an AFC Women's Club Championship that is going on. So India's champion women's club, which is Gokulam Kerala, they have sent a team that's meant to participate in games that are starting on the 23rd of this month. But if this ban, which, I mean, the Supreme Court, the center has now asked for the Supreme Court to have another urgent hearing on this matter. And there is enough scope for this ban to be overturned before the 23rd. But it seems unlikely that the clubs in this case and all of that will be able to keep their team abroad for that duration, with the uncertainty of whether or not the ban will be repealed, whether they will be allowed to play or not. So the immediate impact will be felt by players who are either with a team that is playing a continental club competition, and both men's and women's teams are going to be playing those in the next 2 or 3 weeks, as well as national teams across all age groups that are participating in various kinds of international competitions. So no other member nation of FIFA is permitted to have any kind of sporting relations with India as long as this suspension is in place.
Okay, Siddhant, what went wrong at the AIFF and how can India now try to unsuspend itself?
So the procedure, let me answer the second part of your question first, because the procedure to unban ourselves or get us unsuspended is fairly straightforward. It's been outlined by FIFA and the AFC in the communication that they have sent to the AIFF announcing this ban. Quite simply, it means that the present state of litigation that is existing over the All India Football Federation, where the Supreme Court appointed committee of administrators is looking after day-to-day affairs of the committee. The entire mandate of that committee needs to be repealed by the Supreme Court or whatever other powers that be, essentially ensuring that, according to FIFA statutes, the All India Football Federation is allowed to continue with the day-to-day operations and administration of the sport of football without interference from any third party. That's the bottom line. So what they are saying is this committee of administrators was put into place actually way back in 2017 because of irregularities in the elections held then, the desire to frame a new constitution in accordance with India's national sports code, etc., etc. And also in the interests of good governance and transparency and lack of corruption in the game and all of those high ideals that we associate with sport. However, what it seems now is that FIFA is desirous. One of the things that was critical in this was that the Committee of Administrators recommended the inclusion of former players, eminent players, to the tune of 36, with voting rights to elect the next executive committee of the federation, right? Now, FIFA has taken some kind of offense to this. They said this kind of change is not in our kind of mandate. We like politicians and administrators to administrate a sport and for athletes to be used for whatever purposes they serve. This is me paraphrasing. This is not what they say actually. But so essentially what they want is probably to go back to the template or the constitution that was in place, the electoral rules that were in place prior to all of this legal stuff going on, and for the AIFF to hold elections according to that constitution and then take it from there. So essentially returning to the status quo that existed before all of this litigation began. As for the first part of your question, Pragya, what went wrong at the AIFF? Essentially, I mean, it's a fairly long and complex story that involves a lot of litigation. So I'm not going to get into the details, but at some point in the last 5 to 7 years, people have realized that football in India is a growing and potentially highly lucrative industry or sector of the entertainment industry, however you want to categorize it. And therefore, the number of people throwing their hats in the ring in order to kind of control the direction in which this grows and who benefits from it and how they are able to set all of this up has kind of multiplied. Now, back in 2010, the Football Federation signed what is called a master rights agreement with a private company to become their commercial partners. which means that for a fixed sum of money every year, that company then had the rights to pretty much everything that involved the sport in India, including any potential to earn profit from it. Now, at that time, this organization was relatively impoverished. It had no real sponsorship scopes. It was poorly managed, etc., etc. So this private company coming in was looked at as a major boon. Some investment is coming in, and now we are going to grow from here. Very soon, people realized that the way that private company coming in was structured very much in the shape of a monopoly. And when you have a monopoly, we all know how that proceeds. So only those people who hold that monopoly obviously make any sort of profit, and the wider system doesn't just sort of lose out, but it's all antithetical to the growth of the overall system. So all of these fights then erupted. And now, after 5 years of all of this going on, when India is hosting a FIFA finals tournament, is when FIFA has decided is the most opportune time to use their stick and jump in with this ban. So that is essentially a very quick summary of what has gone wrong.
But there were also some questions about the administrators and their role in AIFF.
Right. So generally, when something like this is happening internally, what FIFA does is it doesn't interfere with the operations of what happens inside, right? But when it's brought to their attention, as it was in this case, by the people who were in the previous executive committee, so led by the president, then Praful Patel, etc., that this is what is going on, and our independent functioning is facing intimidation or interference or any other kind of meddling, essentially, in how elections are conducted, tournaments are conducted, etc., including things like this master rights commercial agreement. So that was brought to the attention of FIFA, who then wrote back saying, okay, please give us a full transcript of what the court has said. Now, their lawyers have looked at this actual wording of what the Supreme Court's last couple of orders would have been. In this case, what they are recommending, etc., and they have come to the conclusion that that is in violation of some fundamental aspects, Article 14, Article 16 of the FIFA statutes. Essentially, again, pertaining to this third-party interference part. Essentially, FIFA is this kind of supranational body, right? And it likes to believe that at least in the dominion of football, not even governments have the right to interfere in how it decides things should function. So, at one level, it's also that kind of an ego battle.
All right. Siddhant, thanks a lot for that detailed explanation. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Keep watching us and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for updates from around the world. And for more news and analysis, visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org.